Did you see the number? You see the enrollment stuff? No, I didn't.
First
You got tax stuff.
We had.
I will call this regular council meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. Deputy Chief, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should you remain standing for a moment, please? Heavenly Father, we ask for your divine intervention tonight. We ask that you guide us in our discussions, as some of our topics tonight involve uncharted waters. And Matthew tells us that as Peter, told by Jesus to step out on the boat and walk on the water towards him, Peter began to falter, became afraid, began to doubt himself, and started to lose faith. Lord, we ask tonight for the strength to endure, and that our visions for our city be full of faith, and that we remember to trust in you and in you alone, so thy will be done. And we ask for all of this tonight in your holy name. Amen. Okay, Kathy, roll please.
Carter? Here. Walter?
Here.
Howe?
Here.
Barstow?
Here.
Hayes? Here. Hicken?
Here.
Lee?
Here. Okay, we have a quorum present. First thing on the agenda is citizens' comments, and before we get started with the regular citizens' comments, I'd like to introduce you to somebody. Katie, come on up to the podium for a minute, please. The last 2 or 3 years, as you know, our community events have increased tremendously. And I found myself going from event to event. As soon as one was over, I'd start on the next one, but you just can't do that in this day and age and have a successful community event, because it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of organizing, it takes fundraising, it takes a lot of work. And as I spoke to several people in the community, Katie kind of put her hand up and said, "Hey, I'd love to help." So Katie's going to be kind of my activity coordinator to help me out with the fireworks, to help me out with the power show, to help me out with the street fair, to help us out with the Easter egg hunt. She'll be a liaison with the Lions Club, the Rotary, the Firefighters Association, myself, with Jess, the city, BJ, everything that's going on. She's going to try to help me, coordinate it and work with community involvement and service groups so that the events run a little bit smoother. And I will be using, it's not coming out of the city coffers, it's my own money. So, and she's assured me that she's not going to charge me very much. Basically, she wants to help her community out, but of course there'll be things like printing and stamps and postage and those things that I'm not gonna expect her to have to pay for. So, thank you, Katie. Would you like to say anything tonight?
I'll just introduce myself. Like Mayor Compton said, I'm Katie. You may hear from me from time to time, depending on the different events that are going on. Drafting a letter right now to send out to some local businesses, and that's it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And you can go home, you don't have to stay for
Okay.
me. Thank you, Katie. All right, any other citizens' comments tonight? Anybody wish to speak? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to introduction, discussion. I'm sorry, what did I mess up? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Haynes.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Haynes. Go ahead, Alan.
I just want to take a minute to introduce the Licking County Hazard Mitigation Plan. This is an effort that's been commissioned by Licking County to create a plan that will identify and determine how to mitigate hazards within the county. The types of risks we're talking about are natural hazards, severe weather, flooding, fire, that kind of thing. There will be some public outreach as part of the plan, including this effort right here to get it on our agenda. That's part of our public outreach. And then there's a committee which I will be part of to identify these and kind of vet the plan out. As far as the plan itself, it's required for a lot of federal and state funding for natural hazards. So by creating this plans, Licking County on the whole will be able to receive funding if needed for certain hazards. And then our role in this plan is basically a little bit of my time, having this discussion, and then in the future having a resolution to support the plan once the plan is finalized. That's it. We've only had one meeting so far. It's in its infancy. Wanted to get the word out there and happy to answer any questions about that.
Anything? Yes, sir.
Now, does it also include, for instance, insects or some type of outbreak in that manner, rather than just natural physical hazards?
Yes, we discussed that at the first meeting, like the emerald ash borer and that sort of thing, yes.
Yes, sir.
When I hear mitigation, I think fix it after it's done. Is this more on the planning side?
This is on the planning side, trying to prepare for those sorts of things.
And is it possible, we've run into a problem, if you wanna call it that, or an issue, a discussion topic in the past, where plans were formulated, and I think council was somewhat surprised that these things the city had agreed to dedicate themselves to do within the context of the plan. Yeah, any updates you can give council that can cushion that blow, or let us give input to you as the plan is being drafted, would be much appreciated.
Duly noted.
How often do you meet, Alan?
We had our first meeting in January. The second meeting is this Friday. I don't know exactly the plan is moving forward
Once a month.
so far.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions for Alan? Okay, thank you, sir. Didn't mean to exclude you. Introduction, discussion, and approval of consent agenda matters.
So moved.
Seconded by Mr. Barstow, seconded by Mr. Powell. Discussion and roll.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow.
Yes.
Hayes,
Here. Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda passes. On to reports. I just wanted to, I know we've been having some discussions on sirens, and of course, if anybody watched or listened to the news today, there was another snafu in Licking County, and you know, I get a little frustrated because I know some of the things we can't control, what ODOT does or what AEP does or the county does, but I get frustrated because we used to be able to, I don't know if we did it physically, but we used to be able to, I mean, every Wednesday afternoon at noon, our tornado sirens went off and we knew that they were working. And it's just drifted away from that, and I get frustrated. Look what we ran into last year. You know, it was March 1st, tornado season started, and we didn't have 3 or 4 that were working. And, you know, we thought we were getting on page with everybody that was involved, and now here to find out we're back in the same boat with no, I know we have nothing to do with it. But I would sure like to see us, is there any way we can get more involved or test our own at some point, to know that as a community, we're safe and sound? Is that a possibility? Yes, sir.
We could certainly test them here at a local level, but when setting them off from county EMA and 911, we wouldn't be able to coordinate that. What we have realized, and I share your frustration, I was gonna bring this up during my report, because not only is, in January, they weren't testing because they were having problems with backups. This month, they didn't have their regular test because we were having other inclement weather, and they didn't wanna worry people about doing it. So we scheduled a special test to have them done. We did find, 2 that didn't go off. There was one, power was off, I believe.
The batteries of both of them.
Batteries in both of them, those have been repaired, so we're good. But at the same time, I even reached out and said, hey, can we be notified when these things are canceled or not gonna happen? I'm told it's, hey, when 911, if they have time, will let us know, As far as setting them off and making sure it works with the whole system, I mean, we're tied into their system when they set them off countywide. Thankfully, today, when the snafu, as you call it, went off, none of that happened here, but at the same time, I think it shows the fault that's in that system with these tornado sirens. And it was locally based in Newark, but at the same time, it just seems like we're having way too many issues anymore with these tornado sirens. So I continue to, work with EMA to say, what's going on here? What can be done with these? We don't have a way to sound them when it's tied into, the county systems.
Yes.
I just wanted to check, so the 2 that were not working was Freedom Park and Heights, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, and the batteries you said have been since replaced?
Yes, and we're gonna test later this week.
Okay, so so we don't know from the time the battery was replaced until now if they do function correctly, because in the past, the batteries have been fine and they've not functioned
Right.
correctly. I mean, we've had a couple malfunctions just in the past year.
Well, in December, when they were tested, they all worked because Alan sends guys out, and this is part of the frustration too, Alan sends guys out to each siren when they're supposed to happen. So if a test is canceled or it doesn't happen, they're just sitting there. So in December, everything worked.
Is that after the batteries were replaced?
No, batteries, everything worked then, nothing was tested in January
I see.
because they said, hey, it didn't happen. Just this past Thursday, we had a special test, batteries didn't go off, batteries have since been replaced. As Alan said, we're gonna be testing them later this week.
We are going to be testing them.
We're gonna have the county test them. We don't have a way to test these sirens.
It's just not acceptable to me for some reason. I don't know why you couldn't hook it up so that, instead of it going audible, you could at least see that it was going, power was going to the amplifier or the speaker, and it would work if you just flipped the switch. I'm getting frustrated that we can't. Do we own these?
We
own them.
do. Signal comes from the county EMA and 911 that set them off when there's inclement weather.
But there should be able to have some type of a test mode. Most pieces of equipment have test mode, but,
We can certainly look at it.
okay, please, thank you very much.
I will say though, if we test them, we know it's working locally. We don't know if it's working from county EMA and 911. So if they set them off, whether or not they will work. So
I just
Tell you
wanna
that.
know if they're physically working so that, whether, okay, thank you for looking into that. I appreciate that.
Mayor?
Yes?
I echo that, and it sounds like, if you remember, there was a time when the problem was both internal and external. And it sounds to me like we have addressed our part of it.
yes.
The worst part for me is what apparently just saying, hey, they aren't working isn't getting through. And these, this is something, our citizens are relying on that. God forbid we have something occur and there's this malfunction in the connectivity between what essentially is Newark or Heath and here. And I think we owe it to ask why is this not working? And what is, I guess my question is, what is the next escalation in that? Is it something from council formally or the mayor or Mr. King to say, hey, this has happened multiple times and none of us feel comfortable with this. And here comes bad weather season, right around the corner. So I'm as much interested in what is the next escalation in that, because we're responsible for our own citizens and this is something that's unacceptable.
What I would certainly say is the next escalation is inviting the county EMA director who manages these things to the next council meeting to answer those questions.
I'd make a,
I'd be for that.
I'd be in favor of that invitation being sent out.
Invitation will be sent.
Thank you. Just want to bring your attention, tomorrow, Mr. John Spencer, who owns the mulch manufacturing plant, is handing the reins over to his son, and I did a proclamation for him today. He's been quite a community leader over the years, donating things to the city, and I was quite surprised to find out that he was a Navy guy, and he actually was a test pilot for the jetpacks, the James Bond jetpacks. So I thought that was pretty cool today. But I gave him a little proclamation. But right here in good old Pataskala, we have a James Bond jetpack guy. So I thought that was kind of cool. You probably saw from BJ. I was going to echo also the investors' breakfast for Grow Licking County is coming up. If you're interested. Please let me know, and we'll make sure we have tickets and a place to sit, because we're investors and we're considered freebies to go to that investors breakfast. Is that April 2nd?
I believe it's April 2nd.
Yeah, April 2nd. I'll get you the details if you'd like to go. So, and then I've also asked BJ to the last couple of weeks. I was going to bring this up at the next council meeting, and it already had surfaced, and a few folks were talking about it, but. As the entrance to our city, the first 25-mile-an-hour sign, you don't see that until you hit about the church.
On 310.
On 310. I'm sorry, downtown on 310 as you enter the city, heading north on 310. And I consider that a residential area. We go from 50 to 35, and then if you turn on Broad Street, right there at Catalona Performance and the Dairy Hut, there's an immediate 25-mile-an-hour sign. Yet on the other end of town, you travel past 15 to 20 houses, and you're a quarter of the way through downtown before you hit a 25-mile-an-hour sign. So I've asked BJ to take a look at that for safety reasons, because we've had, as the chief knows, we put out the speed trailer not too long ago up at the corner, because we had some residents asking to get the trucks and the cars to slow down, and I haven't seen that information yet. If you'd have Mr. Ramsey get that data for me, I'd appreciate it, so that we can share it with Alan and Jason and BJ and everybody else. So I've asked BJ to take a look at that for me, so I think it's important. That's all I have. Mr. Council President?
Had a great lunch today at the Chamber of Commerce down at COTC. That was informative. The AEP was the guest speaker, and I was dying to ask the guest speaker about Main Street, but the mayor and BJ held me down. And Lanier gave a great presentation about movement, or move, which was really interesting. Got passed out some flyers, I hope. And
Yes.
it was pushing
The program.
Pushing, that's not the right. Advertising.
Promoting
and advertising is probably did a great job of that. I gave a little spiel, but that was good, good. And, I had a great, I bought a sandwich this evening at Scooby, and had a great, cashier. He's one of Miss Hayes' students. Rocky did a great job. He was shocked that I knew that she might be his teacher. He wanted to know how I knew that.
Because she doesn't leave the school. His teachers don't leave school.
I know. He was kind of surprised. He did a great job, and that's one of the great things about living in a small town. Is he did a nice job. Although he revealed that he's not getting paid very much. So I said if he needs a good agent or attorney, I could help him out. So that's all I have. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
And how much did you tip him tonight?
I gave him $1.
Very good.
I'm not spending all $1.
Hey. Mr. Zetz, what do you got for me?
I had nothing.
Isn't that against the law? Law director? Okay.
I could have not given him anything.
Okay, gotcha. Mr. King, what do you got for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. You've already touched on tornado sirens. I had that on my list. Next thing is the executive session this evening. We will head upstairs for that when we get there. Last thing I want to mention is I had a good meeting this morning with Ann Walther to continue discussions about pool transition. We're going to be meeting every 2 weeks. What we're going to be presenting is kind of in 2019 quasi model where PRA is still involved, city's also involved, taking on some of the responsibilities, whether that is having agreements with the porpoises, for them to hold their,
Swim meets.
swim meets there, yes, thank you. Swim meets there and, some of the other responsibilities with chemicals and having vendors. And we're also talking about share of some of the revenue to help cover some of that. So it's gonna be, 2019 is gonna be a quasi, effort between PRA and the city with, as we continue to go on transitioning less and less with PRA. And then 2020, as we build the 2020 budget, budgeting for that stuff based on all the historical revenue and everything that we have. 2020, then it would become a city, managed, facility. So, happy to answer any questions, that's all I have.
Anything for BJ? And I do appreciate Ann and Andy transitioning. That helps us out tremendously, so. Mr. Nicholson?
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't have anything other than what was already in my report. This is tax season, so if you have constituents who need assistance or might be confused with the forms, the requirements, whatever, please have them reach out to us. Janice has done a really excellent job this year so far. She has a lot of walk-in traffic. We probably have, at least right now so far, probably 5 to 6 every day who walk in and ask for assistance, and we're happy to help. So just, if you get questions or concerns, steer them our way, and we're happy to help.
Yes, Mr. King.
Not to get ahead of myself, but just as a, little plug, I think, Janice is gonna be coming up on retirement here in a couple of years. She certainly offers a great service to the community as Rita, so we may wanna think about having some, tax days with Janice and contracting with her for that service in the future. It's nothing immediate, but, she certainly has a great way of working with people, as we know.
I've given her 8 years and then she can retire.
Right. So we've got time.
It's nice of you.
Nice.
Well, and I appreciate it, being able to tell residents that have, and I'm one of them, I don't have anything in my brain that relates to taxes, so many residents have come in and sat down and talked with her and have gotten great advice and everything taken care of, and that means a lot, so I appreciate that. Anything for Jamie? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanna say that Janice has to stay so she can continue to help my daughter keep her taxes together every year.
I'll pass that along.
Bree might have to buy her lunch or something this year.
Maybe we'll advertise tax days with Janice.
Yes, yes.
Tax days with
She needs a
Janice.
VIP spot, so.
Might I tell her?
Yeah. We will.
Tax days with Janice on PBS. All right, Chris, what do you got for me?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a whole lot tonight, just a couple highlights. The EPA did our pre-permit renewal inspection at the wastewater plant February 5th. Everything went really well. The only concern he had is we get a lot of I&I water, which is rainwater, groundwater, getting in our collection system in Old Town. And every year the number seems to go up just a little bit. Last year was a heavy rain year, so the number went up quite a bit. Our flows coming in, the plant went up, which he expressed was a slight concern, not too big of a deal, but they may request some type of a plan moving forward on how we're going to address the I&I issue that comes mostly from Old Town area. System Superintendent Trent Howe started today, so we are finally back to full staff. I've been harping on that for a couple months now, so I'm excited to get everybody in and rolling. A couple updates in the report section of my report. The SSO report and the ASR report are both completed. They were not completed when I made my report for council, but we finished those up last week. There are reports to go to the EPA. One is for sanitary sewer overflows. The ASR is for the annual sludge report, covers our biosolids that we produced last year. Outside of that, I really don't have very much else unless there's any questions.
Well, everybody else is in the same boat with groundwater, so.
Yeah, it's not unique to us. It is not unique to us at all, right?
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, Chris, on the press, you had mentioned in your report of 8% improvement on the phosphorus. What does that do for our, I know we're at 1.1 milligrams per liter. What does that do for us, or micrograms per liter? What does that do for us, that 8% improvement?
So the improvement, it helps us, right now, during the winter months, the phosphorus coming in is lower than in the summer months. So in January, we actually were below a 1 milligram per liter, which is what we expect the EPA's limit to be moving forward. When we get to the summer months, we'll still be at around the 2.75, something like that, on the effluent. So it definitely helps. It does help. I don't think it it helps with the phosphorus problem as much as we thought it might in the past, but it is a benefit to the phosphorus problem.
And then one last thing, I did talk to both the farmers, and I've talked, hopefully we can talk at the utility committee meeting. Both are very interested in participating and continuing to participate in the
Excellent.
product spreading, but definitely would like to sit down and talk with what kind of details. The letter that was sent out probably didn't answer all the questions that they may have had, so hopefully Carr and Sutherland can work with the city to benefit the city and benefit themselves.
Absolutely, that's great. That's good to hear.
That'd be great. Anything else? Thanks, sir. Mr. Haynes?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a resolution on tonight, 16, for acceptance of infrastructure improvements at section 4.1 of Hazelwood. They have met all of the requirements with the exception of one, and that is, like I said in the legislative report, they have not put the intermediate asphalt down. It's not the time of year to do that, so I don't think it's appropriate to do that. They have put up a performance bond, so we have leverage for them to complete that one, so we do have the weather to do that, and that's our time to do it. Aside from that, I've had a lot of calls and emails in the last couple of weeks, a lot to do with drainage and a number to do with potholes, so those numbers have been up, taken a fair amount of time. I think I've got out and looked at most of the drainage concerns. Certainly if you have any more, happy to go out and look at those. And as far as potholes, of course with the weather they're having, we'll fill them 1 week, they'll be out the next, so we're staying up on that and trying to get to them as quickly as we can. Aside from that, of course, we have some snow coming tonight. The guys should be in about 4 o'clock to keep up with that, and happy to answer any questions.
Anything for Alan? Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple things. First, I spoke with the street committee members, and Alan, we're gonna have a street committee meeting next Monday at 4:30. Keep things moving right along. And Alan did send a resident to me, with some drainage concerns, on Monarch, which I wasn't aware is as bad as it is. And he actually sent me an email, so I have some pictures that I'm happy to share with you guys. The irony is my husband had just, after, you know, the rain came and then it froze a little bit, came to me and said, man, I just slid on Monarch and almost hit a van that was sitting in water. And ironically, the next day, this gentleman sent me a picture of his van sitting in water, a Monarch. So we're going to look into that. I know that it's a, not only on the street, but it's the retention basin and right near that house. So there's definitely a problem back there that we need to, amongst others. But from what I understand, this has been going on for some time on Monarch, and we just realized that it's something that we're probably going to have to handle financially. The city is going to. So potholes. If you want to check out Dixon just before you get to Graham.
We've patched up there several times and we'll continue to, that's our priority.
If I blow another tire, might have to find a place to live. So
Fortunately, we're repaving that one this year.
I would appreciate it if you take a look at that particular pothole. And I have one more thing. That's it for now.
Well, that finance we have up there where we're sharing the road with Jefferson Township, when are they due to do their part, and when are we due to do our part?
I believe their part was done just a couple of years ago, and I don't know of any problems in their part.
Okay.
And our part we're doing this year.
Okay, very good. Anything else for Alan? All right, thank you, Alan. Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick update to my report. The public comment period for the draft comprehensive plan was open for about a month. So we have closed that and are collecting all the feedback that we received. I've reached out to the steering committee to try and get another meeting so that we can discuss the feedback and make updates to the plan as appropriate. Right now, we're looking at February 28th, but I only have 4 of 7 confirmations, but that's our plan at this point. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Anything for Scott tonight? All right, thank you, Scott. Lanier?
Thank you, Mayor. Haven't seen you guys in a month, so I got quite a few things on my list that I would like to highlight. I apologize for that. First thing, we have I have a supplemental one for tonight for the final approval for the $2,000 that was donated by the Masons last year for the Foundation Park softball pads. I'm hoping to have those in and completed before April. And those pads will be equipped. They'll be probably approximately 8 by 20 pads, and hope that we're able to put overhangs over them in the future. Next thing on the list, Liberty Park project. This Thursday, I'll be meeting with Metro Parks Landscape Architects in regarding to utilizing their nature play specs. I'm hoping that we can have a good meeting with them and we can possibly use their specs for our nature play area in Liberty Park. Foundation Park project and bathroom improvements. The partitions have been removed. We cleaned them up a little bit and the partitions were delivered today. So that project will be completed probably in mid-March, prior to soccer season starting April 6th. The application period for our 2 open positions was closed last Friday. I have 2 interviews tomorrow, hoping to close those out and offer positions possibly Friday. Last 2 things, soccer registrations are in full swing. I got 210 total registrants currently. On-site registration is this Saturday, so I'm hoping to get roughly 200 or more. I'm trying to beat 900 that we had last year to try to get 1,000 total registrants for the year. We've had thus far 11 total sponsors, totaling $4,025. So hoping to keep that going. And the last day for sponsorships will be March 15th. Last thing on the list, Parks Board. Last Parks Board meeting, they basically completed an Eagle Scout project policy. We're meeting next week to hopefully finalize that and bring that to you guys for recommendation for approval. That way we can have that in place when others come in, other project or Eagle Scouts come in, we can have documentation for them to fill out. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We got a couple Eagle Scouts that are very anxious to talk to you, so I'm glad that's coming together. Yes, sir, Mr. Hicken?
What's the situation, if you could refresh my memory on the septic tank?
Holding tanks. We're moving along with that. We received the, final quote from EC Babbage. We're trying to finalize if we would like to have a collar on the base of that. We're coming in under budget so far. We budgeted $11,000 and hoping to be able to complete that project before April 6th, but we're hoping to get it done early March.
As I recall, there was a bifurcation of work, or there was a division of work. It wasn't all one company. Is
The
that
Insurer Brothers will be installing and doing the plumbing work, and EC Babbage will be providing the holding tank and also the alarm system.
And goal was to have it in before the April soccer?
Oh, no, I'm trying to have it in, trying to complete the holding tank process with Alan and also BJ and have it in, I think, within the 2nd week of March.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
On the open registration for this weekend, is that also for the HESA and MESA programs, or
Yes,
are
that's
you
for
doing
everybody, but I haven't put that out there for everyone. So yes, that's for everybody.
Sorry if I gave something away there. Are you going to put that on the website for, because I'm getting a lot of questions about the HESA part at least, for sign up.
I can put something out tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mr. King?
No, I was just gonna say, in regards to the holding tanks, Ventura Brothers is also going to abandon the existing one, and it'll be done. One of the holdups, Lanier got all the prices, but we talked about doing a high water alarm. I think that's important to have. So I asked them to reach out and get those, and we finalized that, so I know you put in the requisitions, I believe, already for everything, and
Yep.
just a matter of scheduling it.
Okay, congratulations on your wellness series. The Lions Club was packed, that first one, and that night I went by and there was like 40 cars sitting there, so
Nice.
congratulations. I think you have one going on right now, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
Very good. Very good. Anything else for Lanier? All right, Chief Brooks?
Actually, I have nothing tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Just thinking of police station, what's our update on our contributions for the fitness equipment?
Where are we with the donations?
Roughly?
$1,300 roughly.
I don't recall what number I gave you.
I'd say about $1,300.
Okay. And those are the response to our letter we sent out to the chamber businesses?
Those are, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Anything for, yes, ma'am?
I just, out of curiosity, I've seen, the sheriff's presence on Summit and Meek and out in those areas. Is that something that we reached out to them for additional, or they just decided to come hang out, or?
Yeah, no, they just take it upon themselves to do that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I appreciate it. It's nice having the extra presence, but I was just curious if there was something that prompted it, or if it's just the additional traffic construction, whatever it may be.
Sometimes the sheriff's office actually gets traffic grants, and it's kind of like citation driven or activity driven. So they pick areas where they can make a difference.
They're in the right spot, all right.
I'm also seeing increased, state highway patrol also, so, hey, it's good stuff.
Yeah, sometimes the sheriff's office will actually split the grant monies with other departments to boost numbers.
We'll take it. Anything else for Bruce? Thank you, sir. Any committee chair reports tonight? Yes, sir, Mr. Hicken.
This committee chair report, I'm gonna step away. I hope everybody can still hear me because I wanna make sure that these guys over here get this. I'm passing around the 2018 year-end numbers from the fire board. We had our meeting last Thursday. Of particular interest, you will see, let me get back here to the microphone. Of particular interest, I think you'll see that Pataskala is by far the most significant number of responses when you look at incidences by location. 2,243 EMS and 1,877 fire runs within the 2018 year. The fire board opened a new station this year, and if you look, Jersey Township's before and after run time there is quite significant. That station was opened on Morse Road in Jersey. We continue to have the station 404, which was put into service at the end of the previous year. It's essentially servicing the Taylor Road corridor. There's a couple things about that. Number one, it is extremely successful, both in how fast it gets people to our residents on that area of town. It's also in a general billing recovery, it's very successful that way. So essentially, it's pretty unheard of for it to pay for itself. When I say it pays for itself, individuals are not billed, however their insurance is. So the board feels that we don't go after people for co-pays and stuff like that.
Mr. Hicken?
Yeah.
While you're on that, station, that's the only one that they're renting.
That's correct, that's leased.
Okay.
That's leased, and for council members or citizens out there, that station sits kind of just down from the concrete plant, I think it is on Taylor. There's a weird thing, the way Pataskala exists out there, there's like a loop, and it actually exists in that bubble, and it wasn't necessarily by design, but it happens to be in Pataskala. It could have been in Reynoldsburg, or it could have been, technically, I guess, it could have been across the road in Columbus if Limited had put up, I don't know, land for it or whatever. Mr. King?
I was just trying to think back, has the Taylor Road Station been open 2 years now, 3 years?
Just a little bit over a year, not quite a
Okay.
year. So those are good. I think when you look at this, the overall embrace, the chief out there, chief, who is willing to come in and speak in his typical 5-minute spiel about what we have coming on this year. So I'm thinking about inviting him here to make that speech, and he can answer some more perhaps about these numbers. I would also say that there was a general discussion, there are 2 levies on this year. They are renewals, but the district continues, I think, to do a pretty good job. One other thing is we purchased a new tower this year. And I think that's important for the citizens to know that one of the reasons we have to purchase these towers is for places like Amazon and Facebook. It's not how big, tall the buildings are, it's also how far out you've got to reach to get people on the roof, and in addition to the height. And our tower had been patched together, if that's the right term. It had a lot of work done on it. We have refurbished it. The firefighters themselves took it upon themselves to do some electrical work, which is fairly unheard of, to kind of show the dedication of the firefighters. But it was time for us to purchase a new tower. So, I'm happy to answer any more questions. That's a real thumbnail sketch. I think if the chief comes in, he'll probably get a little bit more in depth. But if this Of course, we get these every month in a basic form of how many runs did you have. I would add two more things quickly. The first one is, the second page there is the fire zones. Originally, I forget how many we had, but it was not very many. And as a key for council, if you see that the stations are labeled 401, 405, 403, and 404, that tells you which station is ideally responding to that particular square on that fire zone. And as the district gets better at predicting where the most runs are, these zones can be subdivided or shifted so that we get the very best response that we possibly can. And then the last thing I would say, and I'll hold it up for the people in the audience, you can see that the trend of responses out of this fire district has gone up steadily to almost, 3 short of 6,000 this year. And, that's starting from 2013, where we're about 4,500. So as more people come in, and businesses, as just more traffic comes through, you get more runs. And, I really think the work that the administration out there has done is really good. I won't steal his thunder too much, but I will say this. There's this district has a 50% survival rate for actual cardiac arrests when they show up and the heart is stopped. They kick out some things, some drug overdose situations, but given my love for bacon, and then you can obviously look at me as I love living in a district where the people are so dedicated and the people are so good at responding to that, because it's a feather in the cap of the district. Sorry about that.
Excellent ending.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
That is a phenomenal
That is a phenomenal number, it really is.
Yeah. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we're glad to have you as our fire board rep. Keeping your finger on the pulse there, Baconator. Any other committee chair reports? Anybody have anything tonight? All right, we're moving on to unfinished business. Ordinance 2019-4333 for a third reading. Moved by Mr. Barstow.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hicken. Kathy, when you're ready, third reading.
Ordinance 2019-4333. This is the third reading, an ordinance to make supplemental appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019.
Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I move we adopt ordinance 2019-4333.
Got a motion to adopt.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Powell. Discussion? And roll.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Pickens,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance passes. On to new business. Ordinance 2019-4331 for a first reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hicken,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Powell. Kathy, when you're ready, first reading.
Ordinance 2019-4331, this is the first reading, an ordinance to rezone property located on Refugee Road Southwest, parcel number 063-141-384-00.000, totaling 106.33 plus or minus acres in the city of Pataskla from the medium-low density residential R87 zoning classification to the Planned Development District PDD zoning classification.
Discussion? Yes, sir.
Mayor, I wonder if it's okay if it pleases council to have have Connie or the owner's rep come back up to answer some questions?
Council's pleasure. If we have questions that might relate to the folks that are here tonight, very good. All right, I think we're okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll open it up for, who would you like to
I'll
open
start
that
off with a
discussion?
question, you bet.
Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
sir.
Hi, Connie. One question I had was on the ranch homes, the lifestyle homes, as you
Yes.
call them. How many bedrooms are those designed to be?
They are anywhere from 1 to 3 bedrooms. They have somewhat of a flex space, so a buyer can decide if they want, how they want to treat that space.
Okay. And you had mentioned something in your presentation earlier about in the single-family homes, the minimum square footage was different than what is being requested within the PPD. Or PUD. We're talking, you've got 1440 in there, and you're saying that the lowest is 18 something?
On the single families, yes. We basically, we know the actual style of the house that they're going to be building or intend to build. We wanted to make sure we satisfied the code, so we put the code standards in there, but those are the houses that they intend to build. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Hicken.
Hi,
Hi.
I want to thank Ms. Klima for taking my phone call earlier today or earlier this week. I have no doubt that throughout the readings, I'll probably have some more questions, but I wanted to ask a little bit, one of the concerns that I have, and it's not specific to this site, but this site happens to deal with it, and it has to do with the traffic study. And as the people leave this site, it looks like your traffic study was done. And I know earlier there was a question about, was it done during school or was it not? One of the questions I have is, did the traffic study take into account or focus on the fact that a significant number of these homes are going to be targeted towards an age group that is not typically traveling at rush hour? So when you, and you don't have to answer that now unless you know.
I think I do know that answer.
So if it was, how do you guys, what are your feelings? You hear a lot of people saying up here, or maybe not a lot, but you hear me say, you say this is focused at an older age group. You obviously can't or will not, I think it's probably can't, say, okay, you have to be this old to buy it, right? No discrimination and stuff there. But should those houses be sold to people that are typical rush hour people? Might that not in fact affect your traffic study?
A traffic study was done as though all were single-family houses that would be trafficked.
That's good. May I ask a second question? And it is, this kind of goes a little bit to the overall aesthetics and sometimes what we hear from developers, not in a bad way necessarily, but you talk about the green space. My question would be, how much of that green space was wetlands already? How much of it is theoretically like not buildable? And is it just, or I guess it's always buildable, but you have to build and then you
There
have
are
to.
portions, there's a, I think if you go to the black and white plan, you can see areas that are actual wetlands. And also the pond areas are not, those are retaining areas. There's also, will be some slight mitigation for some wetlands, that will be, taken care of, but this green space now actually consolidates around, on both sides, not just around wetlands, but having a lot of usable areas. And wetlands are actually usable areas too, you just can't build in them, so.
Yeah, or I think sometimes you can build them and then fix them.
Well, you can do it if you go through mitigation.
Mitigation, that's
Yeah.
the word, thank you.
Yeah, actually, in previous versions of this, where that eyebrow is, we did have that community extended up into those wetlands there, and we've removed that because in those iterations, as kind of mentioned earlier, the parks were then placed kind of just in the middle of the blocks, and it really didn't have the aesthetic of being up against the woods and being more accessible for the entire community. It was more of just like a green patch in the middle of a block, where this you're getting better use out of the parks.
Thank you. I have one really quick. You mentioned that in your discussion that you guys had modified your cul-de-sac size. What I saw the cul-de-sac size was 90 curb. I think the fire district wants it 96.
96.
And I don't know, I wasn't sure if that had also been modified.
Yes.
And as a weird note, and this is what I know, our code doesn't say what the fire code says. I'm sure that creates a problem every now and then. I don't know if we want to look at that in the future, but everybody in your ear.
We
Okay.
liked your code better, but we.
I imagine, yes. It's tough to turn that big tower around in a 45-foot cul-de-sac, so, I'll yield my time.
You're fine.
I'm good.
This is the discussion time, so that's what it's for. Mr. Barstow?
Why are you asking for a zoning change? Why don't you just build with what the zoning you've got?
Because, it wouldn't work.
Why not?
It won't work because you can't get enough houses.
Why can't you get enough houses? You have lots of houses.
You can't get enough houses with that density, 50 or so houses on this lot. It wouldn't work.
I don't understand.
Financially, it will not work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Walther?
Another couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. On the street trees, I noticed in the report, it said 50-foot spacing was what the administration would want. Our code says 30 on center. I don't know if you're utilizing those additional trees within the open spaces, or if those trees just aren't being planted. Can you answer
Well, I'll
with
tell
that?
you why, first of all, we're doing it the way we are. It's because of the, we wanna make certain there's a tree in front of every lot, and also we have to avoid driveways. We also are doing some, tree planting in our green spaces and that. I can't tell you, right now, I do not know the exact answer if we're taking all those extra trees, but I know we're doing tree planting, so I don't know the count, but I can have that by the next time.
Okay, so my only request would be is if there are any that are extra, essentially, that don't meet up to that total number, I'm sure there are plenty of places in Pataskla we could use trees. So just keep that in mind, if you wouldn't mind. I've got another question, if you don't. I've got some technical traffic questions, and I know when I didn't have these, I had talked with you on the phone also. I didn't necessarily have these, but I've got a question regarding the report, and it talks about the need for turn lanes at Refugee and Mink. And it quotes that as in a 2020 no-build situation, that they need to have turn lanes. And so my question for your traffic engineer is, does he typically, he, whomever, make those recommendations to municipalities when a level of service goes from B to C? Do they normally make that recommendation for turn lanes? Because what I noticed is, I'll give you the facts. In the AM eastbound, the time goes up by 0.2 seconds. And in the PM, it goes up by 0.8 seconds. And in the westbound, it goes up in the AM by 0.4 seconds and by 0.5 seconds in the no-build situation. That's from the 18 existing to the no-build 20.
Right.
When you go and you look at the 18 to the 22 build, which is your 3 phases are completed now, in theory, they're completed, the actual trip goes up dramatically. The time goes up dramatically. It goes up 2.4 seconds in the eastbound in the morning, 12.2 seconds eastbound in the evening, and then 2 seconds in westbound, 4.6 seconds in the PM. So my question is, by making the statement that in the no-build situation under 2020, you need a turn lane, you're then saying that you don't need to have a turn lane because you already, in theory, have built that turn lane. I'm wondering how I know this is a lot of technical parts to it, but I'm wondering how they're making that recommendation for such a slight increase in time level of service when the real time happens after the build. And that, I just wanted to point that out to CISO, and I don't see anybody from CISO, so.
Well, and I think the best thing is that you've presented this, and I can provide that information and make
Please,
sure
and I can get you a whole lot more
Sure.
detail in that question,
Yeah.
because there's another part to that question that gets even more technical, but I'd be glad to give that to you. Maybe you can help us with understanding.
Sure, and we definitely want to address all those details,
Okay.
and not leave that so.
And I would ask the same to staff, to look at that part, if that makes sense to you, Alan. That's, yeah, anyhow, that's just a technical traffic question. You mind if I ask one more?
This is the time.
All right, I don't want to take everybody's time. The open spaces, we had talked about the open spaces, and I understand those are being maintained by the association. And when I look at the two different subsections, the section A and section B part of this, are you only saying that, well, is it, to my understanding, is it only the part that's within the lifestyle style homes that are going to have the open spaces maintained, or is all open spaces
All open
maintained?
spaces will be maintained.
Even if the single-family homes aren't paying into the association, those open spaces are,
The single families will have an association also, but they will be paying the association to take care of their lawns and that type of thing.
okay, that's what I misunderstood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a traffic question, but it's not a technical one.
That's
I'll
a
need
good,
to,
maybe I can answer it.
who knows? I'm gonna have, Scott or Alan maybe chime in on this. Since I'm looking at the map, and I think this is right, but I don't know. It looks to me like the south half of Refugee Road is in Etna Township, is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's their responsibility, is the south lane is their responsibility? or-
We have a maintenance agreement with Etna Township. This is all of their maintenance area. Our maintenance area goes from roughly 500 foot west of Mink to Columbia, and then they take back over towards 310.
Maintenance including just plowing, maintenance including
All
paving,
maintenance.
okay. Then the Summit and Refugee intersection looks on the map to be even more complicated. It may include Reynoldsburg in there, because Reynoldsburg comes over that far. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know it's not ours, it's either Etna's or Reynoldsburg's.
That's right,
So
it's
that-
split between Etna and Reynoldsburg there.
So if that needed to be, if that intersection needed to be improved, we'd have to get either Reynoldsburg and or Etna Township to improve it.
Correct.
Okay. So none of that intersection is the city's responsibility. The Summit, the Summit Refugee, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Summit Refugee, intersection.
Correct.
Okay. Want that to include turn lanes, light, signals, stop signs,
All the-
cul-de-sac, or, roundabouts. Okay.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir. One more. Just in general, you know, we have a comprehensive plan that we are now looking at, as we probably heard was mentioned. You know, one of the big ideas in that comprehensive plan is to have a rural characteristic. What do you think, as far as this community would present, and I understand that comprehensive plan is not in force, it's not been approved by council in any way, a lot of vetting still left to do on that, but in your opinion, just because I've heard for many, many years about how important it is to continue to have that rural characteristic out here, what do you think that this promotes as far as rural characteristic?
I'm glad you asked. First of all, as we've stressed, the fact that we've consolidated the open spaces and green spaces, and we have the green area in the front. The conservation suburban area, which is in the draft for this area, says that open space should have restored to its natural state. Sensitive features are protected, which we're doing. Recreational paths can be included within the open space, and open spaces should be landscaped with native plants that require little support. These green spaces, unlike a lot of subdivisions that have open spaces, have worked to basically consolidate those and make those real, actual open spaces. Kids can get up in the morning, go back and play in the trees, do whatever, you know, you can take walking paths. You're not sitting there mowing lawns, there's actual natural growths of all types of plants, that type of thing. So, we've got walking trails, we've got actual using areas in the eyebrow, an area where kids can actually take their bikes, stop, go back, do all types of activities. So I think that's one thing. Also in the conservation suburban, it talks about intensity, and it talks about anywhere from 1 unit for 2 acres, but also, you can increase that with density bonuses shall not exceed 2 units per acre, which ours is. It's a density of 2 units per acre, so we're in accordance with that also. And it's interesting because it even says recommended uses will be both detached and attached single families. Of course, we're only doing detached single families, so that's how I feel about it.
So two follow-up questions on that. So the first one is that comprehensive plan draft also talks about a linked bicycle or path system. Do you see the ability to have that type of pathway through this community?
Yes.
And do you think that this is already supplying that?
Yeah, in fact, I think that it's designed that way. First of all, we're giving the additional right-of-way along Refugee, and then we've also given the 45 feet.
Well, I guess I'm talking
You're talking
more
about
about.
going through.
Exactly.
But
I'm talking about more about the features and
I'll have Brian talk about that.
yeah, the features that are within this subdivision. How are those gonna be accessible to the public?
Right.
Not just the community, but the public in general.
Right, so we did talk about that plan and the future use for the property to the north. So we are providing an easement from the Eyebrow Park up through that for a future path.
Second part question. The entry features that you guys have put out there, the signage, the 8-foot tall signage, I would not consider that to be rural characteristic in any way, shape, or form. Are you guys willing to look at that to maybe amend that entry feature?
The
It's
aesthetic-
very structured. It's a stone pillar type
I
entry
think it's
feature.
like a hanging sign.
Mhm.
Yep. We would look at it,
Okay.
yeah.
Just wanted to throw
Sure.
that out there. that-
If they're shaped like trees with a sign?
Well, more of a rural characteristic to me is a farm type fencing type material, or even, something like Cumberland Trail has used out on Etna. Out in Etna, that's a very rural, entry feature. So anyhow, that's what I would throw.
Yeah,
some-
if there were
some
examples
suggestions.
that you wanted to provide, we would take a look at it, yeah.
And some live goats. That way.
Well, a farm, yeah, if you could have a small farm out there, they'd be even better.
They'll take care of the grass, the green
Yeah.
space.
Okay,
Just-
No, I have one question.
yes.
So you looked at the comprehensive plan, you're okay with the bike path proposals that crisscross the city?
Yes.
And you'd be okay with incorporating that into this
Yeah,
development?
in fact, we had talked about with Scott, that's why we had actually kept that in like that.
Who's going to maintain the green space?
An association
Okay,
that all the homeowners will be part of.
okay, oh, okay, I thought there wasn't, I guess maybe misunderstood, I thought there wasn't gonna be a homeowners association or the family as part of it.
Actually, that association has different rules, there'll be different rules for
Okay.
how those houses are treated.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Two quick things. Number one, in my neighborhood, the developer, this is a long time ago, admittedly, said that there was an HOA. The HOA never materialized. What happens, we talk about the HOA doing this. Is there anything
Yeah.
in-
The state law changed, the Ohio Revised Code now requires, subdivisions of this type and everything to have, HOAs. It actually states when they have to be initiated, when they have to be turned over. It requires bylaws, all those types of things.
who initiates that? Who forces those homeowners to take it over? Because that's run by the homeowners,
Yeah,
right?
so-
If you
so-
get no interest, what's
Sure,
gonna
so
happen?
typically, as the developer, we're the declarant, and we manage the HOA till a certain percentage, typically it's over 75% of the homes are sold in there. So we are managing that. And, the advantage of setting up that HOA is, it's in our best interest, in the city's best interest to sell all of the homes in the community. So without setting up an initial HOA, all of those open spaces will not be maintained, and that would be disadvantaged to us. So we initiate that and maintain the HOA until that point in time.
If you find nobody that steps up and says, hey, I know 75% of the homes, but, none of us care about an HOA, none of us wanna be on it. Will the developer commit to maintaining that until somebody steps up and says, hey, I'd love to be an HOA president?
We would entertain that, or we would typically turn it over to like a property management company, and then the dues from the HOA would be managed through that company.
Okay, second question was, building on Mr. Barstow's question from earlier, could the concept of, could you build here just on, without the zoning change? And the answer was, no, we don't feel that's fiscally possible. Could you do it if the area B was the same density as area A?
No.
No.
It takes that density in B for you guys, in your
Almost
mind,
half,
to make that
yes.
fiscally necessary. Thank you.
And this is 70 some lots less than what we started out with. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one real quick.
Yes, sir.
To his question about the HOA, even if we do have someone, even if after you've reached a certain percentage of build out or whatever, and you turn it over to the homeowners, and the homeowners do take it over, is there a way to ensure that the green spaces are being maintained to an acceptable standard? Or, I mean, we're just kinda at the mercy of the HOA.
Well, the HOA is made up of the homeowners.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so it's obviously self-serving to make certain that it's sustainable. There have been, HOAs that actually permit or have clauses that permit some other entity to come in and state, you know, to enforce it, whether it be an administrative body or whatever, but, those types of things can be considered and have been done. By the actual, signing of a deed, or when you get a deed, you will actually be taking over the oath that you are going to follow those regulations. So that's part of what you agree to when you sign in on this, by the restrictive covenants.
I just have one quick, this is for mainly staff, I think, because I want to ask a quick question, because I've seen, no reflection on what you're doing here, but are developers required, like you talked about tonight, one of them there's a bond that makes sure a road gets blacktop. Do we now have bonds in place for developers to make sure that the green spaces and the bike paths and the retention ponds and everything that they say they're gonna do, it gets done? Because we've had, obviously, developments in the past that, you know, promised bike paths and horse trails and horse barns and whatever, and it never materialized, and then all of a sudden the developer's gone. And again, no reflection on you folks, just the time to ask the question.
I can answer as far as the stormwater facilities. We do have a stormwater maintenance agreement that we require to be filled out by the developer, that those will be maintained by them until such time as an HOA takes over, and then the HOA will maintain them afterwards.
I understand that on roads and drain water and stuff, but the extra amenities that might draw people to hear, when you hear there's gonna be horse farms and horse trails and barns and bike paths and pools and all that stuff, are they committed to doing just that?
There's no requirement for a bond, but if they fail to do that, it would be in violation of the approved zoning, so that would become a zoning violation at that point.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the folks? Yes.
Connie, I think, excuse me, Tim brought up a really good point, he asked a great question there about A and B, and if that would, you know, be appealing to you guys financially. If that is a no, is there anything other than what you've presented, from a rooftop standpoint that would be?
And what are you asking, I don't quite understand the
Okay,
question.
let me put it a different way. Mr. Hicken asked if the density in B, correct me if I'm wrong, if the density in A and B were to match the lower density, what is it, 77? Is that correct, 79?
79 single families.
If those density were to match, to bring the development down in rooftops, he asked if that would be something that you guys would look at, because Mr. Barstow's question was, no, we can't afford that. So Tim asked it a different way. So it's kind of a middle ground is the way I saw it, was maybe somewhere between this and what it's currently zoned. If the answer to Mr. Hickens' question, though, is there a number that is less rooftops than what we're seeing on the screen that would work for you guys financially?
I don't know that answer, because I know that, as I said, this is our third reiteration, and, my client said this is what works, and.
Okay, I'm just asking,
I think it's a great question, Tommy. What I'm saying is we started at the 293 and we're down to 223, and, things are what they are, so.
I guess, Todd, you know, Mr. Barstow asked the first, you know, question, which made sense, and then Mr. Hicken asked for the middle ground, and I'm asking for the middle ground between this and Mr.
Yeah, yeah.
Hicken, so.
It's a big
if there's one-
negotiation.
If there is one, I'm
Yeah.
not negotiating, I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah.
if, you know, the things we've heard tonight, if there was a number that brought that rooftops down, what would work for you guys if that won't? So, does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It's a great question, and I don't know the answer.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Mr. Wolf?
I have one more for you, Connie.
Uh-huh.
The mitigation of the two wetland areas. I had asked this question to you earlier. Were you able to find out, are they gonna mitigate on site, or is this gonna be
It's
through
an actual, it's a
credits?
small amount, and Ryan can tell you.
Yep, so there are a couple wetlands that we will be mitigating and paying into a bank. We're working with, ATC is going through that process right now. for us. I believe they are in the top right intersection right there. There's two spots right there, and then there's one right
There's a long
above
linear
the-
one, yep.
Yeah, down here on the left, and the single family, right in there, a little bit higher there. There's one in there. The national permit allows, if your combined impact is under a half acre, then you can pay into wetland and, banking, so that's a jurisdictional permit that we're going through.
So I wanted to know, thanks.
Does this affect our retention pond numbers? Do they take care of them, right?
The wetlands and retention pond numbers have nothing to do with each other,
Okay,
so it will not.
nothing to do with us.
Correct.
All right, well, listen, good, healthy
It was
discussion.
great, thank you, I appreciate it.
And again, this was just the first reading. We'll have 2 more readings.
Thank you.
And you folks will be able to speak your piece. In fact, you'll be able to speak tonight at the end, towards the meeting. We have a 3-minute block per person if you wish to speak in regards to the situation. But again, 2 more readings, so we're gonna move on. Ordinance 2, yes.
I wanted to make a comment, not
Okay, I'm
necessarily
sorry.
ask a question. Since Connie and I had talked until my phone quit cooperating earlier. And after a lot of the discussion and looking through the plans, and I just wanted to voice some of my concerns that we had talked about, and residents on the west side of town being, primarily where I dwell and travel. Mr. Bauer made a good point about the difficulty in passing levies for the school districts, and that the taxpayers have recently, approved the levy for the new high school and are seeing that reflected in their recent tax increases. In addition to that, we have what I consider to be substantial infrastructure issues on the west side of town. With the 161 corridor, Facebook, Beach Road, Mink, all, and going over to 70, we've become an artery from one side to the other. And you guys have heard me beat this horse, and I don't believe it's dead, but, about our intersections and the width of the road and the amount of, travel time it takes to get from A to B. We just have a number of infrastructure issues, so I don't, necessarily say that we don't want, personally, I don't want rooftops because I don't want more kids. I think that obviously, I have 4, so I like kids, but I don't think that right now that we are positioned in a way to continue to develop large, housing developments. I understand that the rooftops bring our economic development, I get that. But what do we do first? I mean, do we get the rooftops here at the cost of our citizens who already live here? I mean, it's difficult to get out of your driveway sometimes, the taxes, the overcrowding. I'm not an educator, Mr. Bauer, but I do work in the school district, and I have worked on a number of those levies, so I do understand the difficulty in getting those passed. And I do understand the concerns of the residents who can't afford to take on another one, or who would be in support of that. So my concern is more about how we are going about things and what we decide to do first. I wish that we could say we had enough money to go around to fix all of our problems. The fact of the matter is that we don't. And while we have an idea of what we want to fix, especially when it comes to our roadways over the next 5 to 10 years, it's almost a wish list. There's no guarantee, and there's no funding structure in place permanently to get that done. We can beg for help from WRPC or whatever, but when it comes right down to it, we have some serious intersection issues that primarily exist on the west side of town. So I just wanted to put out there that while I'm not opposed to development, I am concerned about how we are positioned right now as we move forward. So when we get into the discussion and the weeds, I just wanna keep the bigger picture of, you know, when we put these things out there, we are impacting other people's day-to-day. While we, you know, want to offer upgrades for some, you know, folks, or in some situations, empty nesters who are downgrading to a different situation, we need to keep in mind how we're gonna go about that before we take a step. So, that's all I have.
Thank you.
I agree with Mrs. Carter, even though I don't live on that side of town, I drive that side of town every day, and, the Summit Broad intersection is a mess. Taylor Broad is even worse, in terms of the crazy things that I see happen there because it's so crowded. So I think this is a real concern, and I concur with Mrs. Carter's assessment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, moving on. Ordinance 2019-4332 for a first reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Barstow, seconded by Mr. Powell. Kathy, when you're ready, first reading.
Ordinance 2019-4332, this is the first reading, and ordinance to amend section 521.11 of the codified ordinances of the city of Pataskla and repeal all other ordinances and parts of the ordinances in conflict therewith.
Discussion?
Sir, may
Yes.
I just want to make mention that I'm concerned about the non-posting part of this proposal. It's kind of our fail-safe way of keeping out of trouble when we go and bill anybody that we can find for mowing. I just want to bring that up again to say, please look at that.
Posting in the newspaper.
Posting on site.
Posting on site. Okay.
Just concerned.
Okay.
Anyhow.
Very good. Point taken. Any other discussion? All right, moving on. Yes,
Maybe,
go ahead.
I would suggest that you offer an amendment at some point, to clarify that. I mean, I'll jump in. Scott, what do we do? So right now, we have weeds, and if they're in violation, so what the procedure now is to go out and nail something to a tree, or the house, or what?
So the current step is if there's a violation for high grass and weeds, Steve will go out and knock on the door to see if he can find anybody at home and talk to them about it. If no one is home, we have a door hanger that we can put on the door. And that says, please give us a call, you have 7 days to correct this violation. If nothing happens, we send out a courtesy letter to them indicating there's a code violation for high grass and weeds, and you have 7 days to correct the violation. Following that, we sent out a violation letter stating that there's an issue on property, and we send that by certified and regular mail to make sure it gets to them in order to correct the problem. If they do not correct it after that, the next step is mayor's court. They come in, it doesn't get us to mow the grass, but as we've said, the issue with safety concerns that if we send a crew out to mow somebody's grass at an occupied home, what issues does that create? So typically, we only mow if it's a vacant property. So the posting on the property was considered with what we've seen the last couple times we've had this issue is the house is vacant. So posting on the property, no one there who owns it is going to see it. So typically, the mailing and trying to contact them has proven more successful than putting it on the property itself.
Okay. I see the section. All right, well, I guess I'd suggest Mr. Walterby offer an amendment, we can look at that.
Well, my point was to ask Mr. Zetz to look into this as far as what our legal requirements are for posting, to then actually apply a fee or a fine. This isn't the notification portion of it or the beginning portion of it. This is after they're found guilty and it's posted that you are now assessed a fine. I mean, that's what we're talking about, not posting on site. So that's my question, and I'm asking that to the law director to look into.
Mr. Hicken, did you have a remark?
I guess my question is just the next line in that. What happens, I personally feel like that sounds like a litany of, we tried to get a hold of you and we did a pretty darn good job of it. What happens if there's no return on the certified letter? It's not vacant, but you've sent it and the thing just comes back and we continue to get a situation where neighbors are going crazy because there's rats or mosquitoes or whatever the case may be, and we can't get them to do anything about it, would be my question.
Typically, we send it out both, because a lot of times if folks get a certified letter from the city, they realize it probably isn't good and refuse to pick it up. So that's why we send it both. By regular mail is typically what we find vast majority of the time is what people receive, and then that's when we get contacted back in terms of, well, I got this violation letter. So very rarely does it go and just automatically come back. If it ever gets to the point that we sent it out and everything's coming back, clearly we're not reaching the people, so we're not gonna say, well, now you're at mayor's court and move forward without at least having some conversation with the person to make sure they're aware of the issue.
I would agree with that, and if there is some type of some legality we're not meeting, I'd be interested to know that, but it sounds to me like we do a fairly decent job of attempting to contact the citizens. That's my
Does
gut.
that go to the renter, or, I mean, let's say it's being rented, does it go to the homeowner if he's out of state, the person that owns the real estate?
Correct. The property owner is who we notify. If there's the renter, we'll talk to them as well, because sometimes in a lease agreement, it could be that, particularly if the owner's out of state or out of the city, that the part of the lease agreement is that the renter is responsible for property maintenance. A lot of the time, we'll do the door hanger first and talk to the renter. If we get no resolution with that is when the courtesy letter and violation letter goes to the property owner. And at that time, we get a lot of property owners saying, I had no idea this was an issue. We will get this resolved, and the property owner goes out and makes sure that the violation is remedied.
Okay. Any other discussion? So if you want to formulate something, we have 2 more readings.
Correct.
Okay, on to resolutions. Is it your desire to keep this one tabled, the
Yes,
first one?
please.
Okay. Resolution 2019-016, a resolution to accept and confirm infrastructure improvements for the Hazelwood Section 4.1 development for public maintenance and operation by the city of Pataskala.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Barstow and seconded by Mr. Powell. Any discussion? You'd mentioned intermediate, so there's a course of blacktop, and then there's the intermediate, and then there's the final. How many more did they have to do?
Well, in this case, there's actually RCC is the base instead of asphalt, so there's about a 7-inch layer of roller compacted concrete, and then there will be an 1 3/4 intermediate course of asphalt, and then 1 1/4 surface course of asphalt. Recently, I've been having developers wait until about the 1-year mark to put that surface course of asphalt down because it gets so torn up during the residential construction.
Okay, so 2 more layers need to go down
Correct.
eventually.
Correct. And
And
if
we're gonna accept it now because we're okay and we have a bond.
because we have a bond, and if there's any instance where they would get somebody occupying before we got that intermediate course down, that they've agreed and we required that they would put a wedge course in front of the driveway, but the reality is we'll probably get that intermediate course down before they're ever ready to get anybody in there for occupancy.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll, please.
Hicken,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Okay, resolution passes. Resolution 2019-017, a resolution amending resolution 2018-013 and thereby increasing the budget for the water reclamation facility phosphorus reduction improvement project.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Barstow
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Hicken. Discussion and roll.
Lee,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Okay, resolution passes. Any discussion concerning the Ohio Division of Liquor Control permit for Old Town Cafe? Any discussion at all on that?
Chief, since they got their liquor permit, has it become a haven of roisterous behavior and
No, everything is fine.
everything's very, very calm, and quiet down there? Okay, that's what I thought. Sorry to ask. You never know.
We have no objections.
Okay.
All right, very good. We'll move on to additional citizens' comments. If anybody wishes to speak, come on up. You'll have I'll need your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak on any topic that we have had discussed here tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Terry Martin. I live at 210 Meadowway Southwest,
Okay.
just west of the proposed development. First off, I want to thank Mr. Lee for blanketing the neighborhood to let us know of this situation, otherwise we would not have known about it at all. I have a couple of questions, some of it may have been answered, but I couldn't quite hear. To Ms. Klima, are the wetlands or the ponds adjacent to the west border? I'm not sure by the defining block there if those back up to the adjacent homes that are right there. Are they right adjacent to their property line?
I don't.
Or is there a buffer?
These are natural, they're not something they're creating. Okay.
Come up so we can,
The
this is
the
being
wetlands are
recorded,
something
so-
that are delineated, so it appears that they go right up to the buffer, I mean, right to the actual property line,
Mhm.
which means portions of them may, I do not know, go over onto the lots. that-
Encroach into the other
Yeah.
properties.
But you would have to, if you own one of those properties, you would have to get, a wetlands delineation of those if that happened.
So if then leading into that then, with the development of the ponds and the mitigation of the wetlands, how will this affect the homeowners is what I'm concerned about. Will that disrupt their property lines? So I don't know if there's an answer to that tonight or not,
I think
but
it's-
it's an issue.
Yeah, I believe as Brian was saying, the wetlands that we're mitigating, we're not bothering the wetlands on that side, it'll remain natural as it is now. The wetlands that we're mitigating are wetlands that would have been internal to the development where there's gonna be streets or actual lots. So actually, that area right there is going to remain where those wetlands are unbothered. Untouched. The actual stormwater retention areas will be further studied, and that will be all on our site. And those will be things that, we've done a lot of stormwater work, and we're gonna continue doing that, working with the engineering department.
Okay. Speaking of stormwater, I'm concerned of that area also. I may be going over my 3 minutes, but I'm concerned
You
about
have
that.
1 minute left.
Because in our neighborhood, we have a lot of stormwater problems, which I probably should talk to Alan about that, because we've had flooding quite a bit over the years, and especially in the last couple of weeks. So that's another issue.
I would,
Go ahead, Mr. King.
if you have a time, I would certainly ask, for you and Alan to exchange, contact information.
Certainly,
Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah.
Mr. Haynes, do you have a comment?
And a lot of times with retention basins, these are sized such that they have to account for all the runoff from that property.
Right.
So in theory, this will make that better. So you'll have less problems,
Okay, well,
in theory.
at least that's good to hear, if things go forward. One last question, it is again with the drainage, and the sewer and the water. Would there need to be additional upgrades along Refugee Road to accommodate all of this, project?
So for the water and the sanitary sewer, that's all Southwest Licking,
Right.
Community Water and Sewer District, so that's all on them. I think, I don't wanna speak for them, but I think they have the capacity for it. As far as the stormwater, we have talked with the developer about the need to ensure that we're not making things worse on Refugee or making things worse in that the existing subdivision. So we would look at what needed to happen to ensure that, we didn't create more problems.
Okay, all right. Those
Thank
are
you,
my
ma'am.
questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak tonight? Yes, sir.
Evening.
Name and address, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
I'm Greg Martin. I live at 210 Meadowway Southwest. I'm just west of it. My question is the traffic study. I come out, I work between, I go and get on Refugee Road, Mink Road between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. I spent quite a bit of time sometimes sitting in Arbor Lane waiting to get onto Mink Road because of coming out of Reynoldsburg. How is the traffic study done for the Mink and Refugee Road done? Is it gonna be turn lanes put in? Is it just gonna be the way it is? And who has to do this?
Who can answer that question?
I could probably answer that. So the traffic study looks at existing conditions, and it looks roughly 2 years into the future at a no-build scenario, and then looks 20, at that point, at a build scenario, and 20 years into the future at a build scenario. This traffic impact study showed that in 2 years without them building, there's a need for turn lanes at that intersection that exists already. So the developers commented that that should be on the city and not on the developer. So at this point, we don't have any resolution to put in any type of turn lanes at that intersection.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
May I speak again?
Yes? Just name and address again, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Dan Bauer, 287 Summit Glen Road. I guess I'm going to be like Miss Carter. I'm beating a dead horse, and it's not dead yet. But I think Mr. Haynes and I can handle that by a phone call. If not, I'm sure he'll come out and look at my concern regarding drainage. The city has spent a lot of money on Arbor Lane. I'm assuming you're all aware of that. At least we can get through now, so I do have a concern. But the one last thing I want to say to you people, as council people, I personally would have a real problem in buying a home priced at what Miss Klima said these homes are going to sell for, and later learn that my child was sitting in a modular someplace being educated. Please give that consideration as you vote.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak? Last chance. All right, very good. Mr. Barstow, what do you got for me tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22 G4 to prepare for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Included in this executive session shall be Chief of Police Bruce Brooks, Deputy Chief of Police Mike Bowles, Brian Sachs, B.J. King, Jamie Nicholson, and Jeff Stan Kunis.
All right, I have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Powell. Discussion? And roll, please.
Carter? Walter?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Barstow?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Pickens?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Okay, executive session at 8:31. And folks, this is gonna be a long one. You might as well go home for this one.
It's not dead.
Beating that horse. I just wanted to, I know you were careful. And
Dan, do this.
Hey, Hick, what kind of a ladder do I get in the tower?
You know,
Bacon one.
what?
A bacon.
I was gonna say, I'll be at the Pierce plant.
It's like Jim Burgess night.
need a motion to come out of executive
So
session.
moved.
Seconded by Mrs. Carter, and seconded by Mr. Powell. Roll call, please.
Would you like to state the time for our vote on the?
Yep, coming out of executive session at 9:49. Roll call, please.
Walter?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Barstow?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Pickens?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Okay, out of executive session.
I did too.
Go round and around the room and start with Mr. Lee.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Nobody wants to, nobody has any announcements or anything they want to talk about?
Second.
Seconded.
Been seconded, it's a
Okay, roll call, Kathy.
Brian, is that
Okay.
late?
Lee moved and Barstow seconded?
Yep.
Powell?
Yes.
Barstow?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Pickens?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Walter?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
That's a first.
Yeah, well, we're only together twice a month, for God's sake. People start.
It's 10 o'clock.
You had more to say?
Are you serious?
You had more to say?